This week on Arts InSight, Houston's historic Glenwood Cemetery.
It's restful and peaceful and a good place to spend eternity, I guess.
A musician bridges science and sound.
I started to think about my sound and how I wanted to be different.
The battle of what makes art revs up.
When you see all the form and all the function come together, it becomes art.
Dissecting the buzz of our city.
The kind of the airwaves that are filling the city and surrounding the city.
I'm Ernie Manous, and it's time to get Arts InSight. Welcome to Arts InSight, where we're standing in the shadows of one of the East End's most recognizable landmarks, the old Maxwell House coffee plant. And come December, a new rail line will open up the East End to Houstonians like never before. It's the next step in a history of transportation that's been central to the development of this area. And we're celebrating the East End with 3 months of amazing arts programming known collectively as Transported and Renewed. We'll tell you more about some of the fun planned, and we'll give you the first boarding on the new rail line in just a moment. But first, as our recent trip to Glenwood Cemetery uncovered, the East End isn't the only place in Houston with a story to tell.
I just think it's such a beautiful and sort of restful, peaceful spot. Sometimes I'll just come out here and bring myself a lawn chair and sit down with a drawing pad and just sketch a little bit, and my blood pressure goes to virtually nothing. It's restful and peaceful and a good place to spend eternity, I guess.
Glenwood was established in 1871, and in those days it was on the edge of development of Houston. It was just outside the city limits, so it was really designed to be this place where you could get out of the hustle and bustle of the city and come into this beautiful, peaceful place, and I think that's still true, even though the city's grown up around it. Glenwood is laid out on a series of ravines that lead down to Buffalo Bayou, so you've got these streets and roads that were laid out along these ravines and these hills. It's both professionally landscaped and naturally landscaped. I think the surprise for people who come into Glenwood is that there is a place in Houston that looks like this. Since it's been here for almost 150 years, you have the full range of cemetery art, from the more elaborate Victorian monuments to the more pared down modern monuments. So coming out here is not only a chance to experience a beautiful piece of Houston, but also a chance to see a lot of really fantastic art and see the way that we have memorialized ourselves over the last century and a half. There is one Victorian monument that people always love to see when they come out here. It's the Hill Monument, and it is a marble angel that is draped over a pedestal. And it was unusual at the time that it was done because angels were not supposed to show grief. Most of the angels that you see at Glenwood are just standing around looking sad or trying to remind you of heaven or pointing or something like that. But this angel is really clearly in distress.
I think of these people, the historic people are here, the great things that they've done for our city, the interesting people that are buried here. There was a man buried here, his name is Wade Hampton Cook, and he was an editor for what became the Houston Post. And he worked downtown, and at that time there was a bar across the street from where his office was. Well, he never stayed in his office, he always went to the bar because he said that every piece of news hits this bar before it hits anywhere else, so I'm gonna get a scoop. And he used to sit at a table back in the back, and he paid the bartender a few bucks, and if anybody came in with a story, the bartender would rap on the bar 3 times, and Hamp would look up and wave and say, "Hey, come over, come over." But when the writers used to finish a story, they always put -30-, which meant the end. And on Hamp's tombstone, it gives his name, it gives when he was born, when he died, and it says -30-.
The Howard Hughes Monument is interesting for a lot of reasons. Number one, it's pretty low-key, it's pretty restrained. You don't see the Hughes name, you know, in giant letters carved in marble or anything. So I think a lot of people who come out here miss it for that reason. They're expecting something bigger than it is. Now, when Howard Hughes himself died in 1976, they expanded the plot, added a couple of trumpets, built a wall, and built a fence around the plot. At the time Howard Hughes died, some of the tabloids had offered rewards if anybody could prove that he wasn't really dead, because he was such a recluse that, you know, people thought maybe he was trying to pull something over on everybody. So they thought it was a good idea to build the fence to make sure that somebody didn't sneak in the plot and, you know, somehow try to prove that he was actually dead.
I think the trees, the sounds, the birds, the architecture, just the whole package. Being a historian and a cemetery fanatic, I just really wanted to be buried out here, so Barbara and I came out and bought ourselves a plot here about 5 years ago. I guess I've always wanted to be buried here. I mean, maybe it's in my DNA. I don't know. It's a magic spot.
For more on the cemetery, go to glenwoodcemetery.org. We're at the coffee plant station on the new Metro Rail East End line, and while the trains won't be running publicly down the tracks until about December, our friends at the Houston Arts Alliance are throwing one heck of a party in anticipation of the rail's opening and the Port of Houston's centennial. They're calling it Transported and Renewed. And here with more is Houston Arts Alliance, Pat Jasper. Hello, Pat.
Hey, Ernie.
There's so much going on to celebrate.
It's an amazing celebration. It's 3 months long. Transported and Renewed is what is called a creative placemaking project. It focuses on a particular sector of a community and uses the arts to enliven and to animate that community.
Okay, take me back a little bit. The centennial of the ship channel, and a lot of people don't consider that part of the East End, but it most definitely is.
Absolutely. Buffalo Bayou is the birthplace of the ship channel. Allen's Landing, of course, is kind of our origin myth here in Houston with the Allen brothers, our own Romulus and Remus. And from there, essentially, the ship channel proceeds a good 52 miles out into Galveston Bay.
Wow, and now 100 years later, we're opening up the light rail here too.
Absolutely, and it's really emblematic of the fact that Houston is about transport, it's about transformation, it's about reinvention, and we wanted to celebrate that side, but also, you know, bring it, bracket it, think about it in terms of who we are as citizens.
And before we get to all the celebrations that are coming, you're going to fill us in on all of that.
Yeah.
In the incorporation of this whole idea of the rail line, art was already worked into it from the start.
Absolutely, and actually, we're standing at one of the stops that was done by Jesse Cifuentes. And Jesse is one of the artists in Transported and Renewed. They've done an incredible job of having art on each of the stops. Jesse's piece for Transported and Renewed is on Navigation Boulevard, and it's called Navigation, and it's a beautiful tile mosaic. And that's an example of a number of public art projects throughout the East End. Jesse Cifuentes with his mural, the amazing Patrick Renner, who's known for the Montrose Funnel Tunnel, is going to be doing a crazy, amazing piece called Conduit in Eastwoods Park.
Okay, so we've talked about the schedules of celebrations too. So what do you have planned?
Well, I've told you a little bit about some of the public art, but there are also going to be a series of events that are kind of in triads. The first being a Latino music series that will kick off at Tony Marone Park on September 7th. That's going to be amazing. We're also going to be doing a series of events at the bayous called the Buffalo Bayous Silos Project, as well as a processional art event. And by processional art event...
Do you mean parade?
Kinda.
Okay,
yeah.
parade.
Everybody loves a parade, and our first one is called Afloat. September 13th, we're doing that in conjunction with Buffalo Bayou Partnership. Our second one will be something called Afoot, which will be this marching band extravaganza. And the third one is called Around, and it's all things on wheels.
Thank you so much for all that. To find out more information, where can people go?
Well, the easiest way to get there is transportedrenewed.com.
Up next, after decades of searching for the perfect instrument, musician Jason Harrelson took matters into his own hands, literally. All aboard?
My best friend, his name was Dave, and Dave was interested in playing my horn because it was a Bach Stradivarius. It was the same model as his horn, but mine was 30 or 35 years old, and his was brand new. So we swapped horns. I couldn't believe how well that horn played compared to mine because they were the exact same model. He gave me my horn back and he said, "Man, your horn plays terrible." That's really what got me started thinking about the physics of how trumpets are designed. I really wanted to understand why these two instruments would play so different. The transition from playing on that old trumpet to where I am today really came from experiments. I took trumpets apart and then I saw how they were put together and I measured all the components as detailed as I could. The artistic side of building trumpet really comes down to really understanding how to do metal work, forming and fabrication with your hands, as well as machining, because on my side of things, I machine a lot of the parts, and then incorporating the final hand touches and all the artistic things within that.
I've gone through so many trumpets in my time over the last 20-some years, and I haven't really found the right horn. I mean, there was always something a little off about each one that I would have. And then the more I started to listen and to think about music on a more professional level, I started to think about my sound and how I wanted to be different.
Joshua, when he contacted me to have a trumpet built, he was looking for a specific type of sound, and for his music, he wanted something that really has a vocal type sound. So I built his trumpet to sound more like a beautiful, big, dark voice.
Over the next 6 months, we did a lot of coordinating as far as how I wanted to be built, and he gave me a lot of perspective because he has a very scientific and engineering point of view, as well as an amazing horn player too, so he's like the package deal.
Where science meets sound has kind of been our tagline for years, and we have a different approach to designing brass instruments, and that's really incorporating acoustics and modern technology into the design and building of trumpets.
When he was building my trumpet, he came up with a combination of two different, a lead pipe and a bell, that when you put them together, they sound really, really dark. And when I played the horn, I thought, gosh, this almost sounds like a tuba, like a small tuba. And it was perfect. It was the perfect instrument. When you play trumpet, the most important thing is the sound. It kind of goes back to just being human. Like when my mom would call me for breakfast, I can hear her sound, like her tone. And so I think about that with the trumpet is when I play, how are people going to remember that versus how many notes did I play or how high did I play? It's more or less remembering the sound. I think traditionally in the past, trumpets are always known as this really high-pitched, loud, blaring instrument that can almost sound like tin foil. The horn itself, the way he built it, actually really supports the darker end of the spectrum. I said, give me the darkest you got, and I'll take it.
There are actually 81 pieces in the simplest trumpet that I build. So I fabricate and build almost every single piece. The magic really happens when we put all these parts together and find that everything fits perfect, and then I can put it in the soldering booth. And then the rest is soldering and cleaning it up. When it's all finished and I finally get to play it and test it out, yeah, it's a great feeling because so much time and energy has been put into building that one horn. Every one of them is different, so it's a lot of fun.
This horn particularly supports that individualism. And I think it really comes from his craftsmanship as well, that he's able to really listen to what the player wants. And him being a player as well, it's so easy for him to connect with the idea. His connection to the instrument itself makes it easy for him to understand me.
For me, playing trumpet, there's more of a connection there. When I perform like that, then I can express whatever's happening. So if I'm frustrated about something or really excited, I can just let all that out. And for me, it's just a personal experience. I think art is really nothing more than an expression of really what you're feeling and thinking and what you want to bring into the world.
Art is, I believe, the human voice or the human eye, or it embodies all the senses. And I think that that's what's beautiful about art, is that it's the true reflection. It's the true history book.
I probably play about 2 hours a day, and I probably play in 15 to 30-minute sessions just in between building trumpets. So it's a great feeling, and I would encourage anyone to take up music.
For more information, visit harrelsontrumpets.com. As we continue our VIP preview ride through the East End on the new Metro rail line, we set our sights on another mode of transportation. It's a yearly motorcycle auction on the Vegas Strip that attracts everyone, from gamers to gawkers.
I'm Evan Ide. I'm the senior motoring specialist for Bonhams Auctioneers.
Race prep condition, they tell us.
My job is to both find products for the auction and also be the sort of person who knows about them.
3,000. I'm going to sell you a bike today. I just know it.
I've always been fascinated with transportation-related objects, because objects, whether they're motorcycles or cars or paintings, you're discussing visual concepts. You know, you're articulating visual things into words.
Flat out speed for two. That's what it's all about.
I'm Don Whalen, and I'm a motorcycle collector and a motorcycle enthusiast. We came here today looking for the possibility of adding something unique that shows up in our collection.
There it is.
My interest in motorcycles is a little complex because the history has become as interesting as the bikes.
This is a 1970 Husqvarna that was owned by the movie actor Steve McQueen. He was quite interested in off-road bikes like this.
My name is Jeff Decker. I'm the sculptor for the Harley-Davidson Motorcycle Company, and I also fancy myself a historian and a motorcycle collector. I'm here because it's a place to find old bikes.
Well, this is a 1905 Leo motorcycle, and it was a motorcycle made in California. This is more of a conventional American design, like an Indian or a Thor, where the engine was mounted into the seat tube of the bike. This machine is the only one of its type that survives today.
The motorcycle itself is pretty fundamental, but when you start to expand on that, the history becomes as intriguing as the motorcycle itself.
That's really important to our nation's development. There was a time when there were crowds as big watching motorcycle racing as we're going to baseball games.
I think America lended itself to the motorcycle being a very practical form of transportation. In certain types of motorcycles, I think the bikes made here are very different from the ones in Europe because the conditions are very different. Here we have longer distances, we have more open roads, and there was a lot more dirt roads, and the improved roads didn't come for quite a while, so the bikes had to be robust, and as a result they took that form that still prevails today. It's a more robust machine.
The motorcycle brought America west. It wasn't the covered wagon, it wasn't the horse. The real population move was moved mechanically to the west with things like motorcycles.
Aesthetics always played a big part in the bikes. They clearly put as much thought into how the thing looked as how it worked.
I can go and look at an intake manifold on an Ace motorcycle, and it looks like a piece of deco artwork.
You certainly could trace parallels in the evolution of this country with the dynamic of the motorcycle. You could look at styling trends, you could look at color schemes, you could see deco movement. You can see the modern movement. You can see the end of the Victorian movement, with wicker baskets and that kind of thing on the bikes.
Architecture is the only practical thing that's accepted as art. We look at Corbusier building or a Wright building or anything like this, and they're accepted with the same seriousness as painting. In a sense, the difference between car, motorcycle, and architecture is these things have the emotion as well. And I think it's a shame to draw the line there.
There's motorcycles that look like they're going down the road sitting still. When you see all the form and all the function come together, it becomes art.
The Guggenheim in New York did a show of the history of the motorcycle. It was more of a design thing than history, but it covered all different countries and all for the bikes.
There were a number of people in the art community that took exception with calling motorcycles art.
I wouldn't say motorcycles are art. I would say that the sculptures that I create are art. As an element of design, they're fantastic. I think that they're awe-inspiring and everything else. But as soon as you take the gas out of something and you stop running it, as soon as you take away its inherent purpose in existence, and you say, oh, now it's art, and put it against the wall, still doesn't make it art. When Van Gogh did a painting, it was always useless, and it was always to be on the wall, and it was always to adorn that wall and to captivate your aesthetic nature. The motorcycle that is in my studio that inspires what I do, it's inspiration, and it's the subject matter, and it's the model, but it's never the art. The art is what comes from the inspiration. There's a lot of guys in here that'll call motorcycles art, and me, as an artist that love motorcycles, disagree with them.
Every motorcycle is different. I think if you stand back and you look at it, it either is attractive to you or it's not.
It is art, and I appreciate the fact that it is American.
You walk up and then you either fall in love with it, so to speak, or you don't.
Once you fall in love with it, it becomes an addiction.
Oh, I like everything about them. I like the aesthetic. I like the styling, I like the design.
The ones that are really organic and lovely, they speak to me. Just looking at them moves me too. I mean, there's really not much on this planet that inspires me more than those silly things.
I think bike is freedom. Bike is, you can just get on it and go anywhere you like.
Next year's auction takes place in January. Finally tonight, we're back in Houston, where a new installation tries to uncover what makes up the buzz of the nation's fourth largest city.
So the installation that we are talking about today is called air condition, and there's a comma between the two words so that you pause for a moment and think about air and think about the condition of air. And then of course it plays off of, you know, the site of Houston and the reality of technology and creating these habitable spaces, right? And air conditioning is literally necessary in a place like this to have a city. But the installation is a video and a sound installation in two parts in downtown Houston at 110 Milam Street. There's a video and sound installation, and here we have a sound-only installation at the main Blaffer Museum space. In both cases, the installation uses the architecture itself as a sort of a material and as a surface. In downtown Houston, there are two video projections on the window, and they sort of make this ghostly sort of image that feels kind of ephemeral, and it's intimately scaled, it's individually scaled. The glass of the building itself is resonating with sound. And the same thing we have here at the Blaffer. I'm using these windows that are part of the architecture to actually resonate the sound through the windows. So the building itself is sort of incorporated into the piece. The sound that you're hearing in the installation is composed of fragments that have been scanned out of Houston's radio waves. So they're kind of the airwaves that are filling the city and surrounding the city and sometimes perforating the city. Radio bands that police and fire and medical responders use, as well as amateur enthusiasts. So you'll be listening to the radio cloud in Houston, and then somebody will pop up from the Mojave Desert, or from Hawaii or something like that, because these things literally circle the globe, these frequencies. All of these signals, right, that surround a city and that make up a city, materials and signals and information and all of that. And you wonder like how much it's marked into time, so then there's this sort of kind of more poetic question of like, how long will this be here, or where will it travel to from here, which is kind of curious and starts to sound sort of sci-fi, I guess. I think it's a lot like the hand on the cave wall, you know, and I was here, or, you know, we were here, or just a sort of some mysterious impulse that's just like, I'm going to leave my mark here, you know, I don't know. I think that's definitely interesting.
For more on the exhibit Air Condition, go to blafferartmuseum.org. The train is pulling back into the station as we wrap up this edition of Arts InSight. Join us again next week for more insightful profiles of artists from Houston and around the country. Thanks for watching. I'm Ernie Manous, and have a great week.